columnist John Roseman. John has been writing parenting columns since 1976. He's the longest-running one of the longest-running syndicated columnists in America, and he joins us now. Going to talk about situation in Kentucky that he's dealing with, and you're not going to believe this, folks, quite frankly. John, good morning to you.
Good morning, Tim and Ed. Thanks for having me on your show.
Absolutely. You since 1976, you've been writing parenting columns?
Yes, I have. And I have been told by reliable sources that my column is the longest-running single-author column in America today.
Well, congratulations.
And not to make you feel bad or anything, but 1976, that was the year I graduated from high school. So,
all right, Ed. We just finished a segment where we want to boost people's self-esteem, not make them be reminded.
I think John Roseman,
can handle it?
I don't think he's worried about me. That's for sure. He's got a very long, distinguished career. I'm just teasing you, John. I know you can take it.
I know you're teasing me.
What happened in Kentucky?
Yeah, this thing in Kentucky is an interesting situation. I received a letter in early May from the Office of the Attorney General of Kentucky at the instigation of the Kentucky Psychology Licensing Board that accused me of practicing psychology in Kentucky without a license. And the basis of the accusation is that my newspaper column appears in 3 Kentucky newspapers, including, and most prominently, the Lexington Herald-Leader. And long story, but last Tuesday, a week ago Tuesday, I filed, my lawyers and I filed a First Amendment lawsuit against the Attorney General of Kentucky and the Kentucky Licensing Board as individuals in federal court in Kentucky. I believe it's called the 8th District.
Well, John, this is a First Amendment case, and the argument that is being made, which seems to me on its face to be ludicrous, is that because you are not a licensed psychologist in Kentucky, then your columns, which dispense, in their view, psychological counseling services, especially in the question and answer format, are run afoul of the licensing process that goes on in Kentucky. But what's interesting to me is I have not heard of Kentucky doing the same thing, as is pointed out in a couple of the articles about this case of yours, that Dear Abby or Dr. Phil, Dr. Oz that are on television, that they're breaking the law because the content is aired in Kentucky. Are you being targeted because of the kinds of advice you give?
Well, I think that is a reasonable question to ask. And I think it is reasonable to say that John Roseman is a heretic in the field of psychology. He does not adhere to, march to, promote what I call the psychological party line, especially where the raising of children is concerned. And I'm bad for business. And a guy like Dr. Phil, even though he's breaking the law too, by their definition, and Dr. Laura and Dr. Drew and numerous other people, including Dear Abby, as you mentioned, those folks are good for business. They lend to the impression that when you have a problem with a child, you should go seek professional help. And I'm trying to help parents avoid having to do that. I'm trying to help parents solve problems before they get to the point where professional help is needed.
Let me ask you this, John. So where's this case going to go now? What's up next?
Well, the case is going to federal court, and we sort of blindsided them, to tell you the truth. They had no idea that they expected me, I think, and this is another thing. I'm a little guy. I don't have the financial resources of somebody like Dr. Laura or Dr. Phil, and they expected me to acquiesce to their absurd demands out of fear of the consequences of running afoul of their bureaucratic authority. And instead, we went up to Kentucky, my lawyers and I, and filed this lawsuit. And it took them, obviously, by complete surprise. And the interesting thing is that, this sort of a case is going to be fought in the court of public opinion, and it's going to be fought in the legal courts. And in the court of public opinion, the outpouring of support for me and our position has been overwhelmingly positive. Overwhelmingly positive. I mean, on both sides of the political aisle, by the way, because even the media, and even the media that Rush Limbaugh identifies as the drive-by media, recognize that this is not only a First Amendment case, this is a freedom of the press issue. And so the media has gotten squarely behind this as well, which is very encouraging.
What is it that you mentioned that you're a heretic in the world of psychology, at modern psychology, how it's defined? What is there one? Are there one or two things that you have spoken out against that is like orthodoxy to these to modern psychology that really makes them irritated at you?
I would say it makes them a bit more than irritated.
Okay, I was trying to be kind.
I am I'll answer that question. I am a psychologist by license in the state of North Carolina. I want to make that clear before I answer your question because it's important to the answer. And I go around the country. I'm a very busy public speaker, as you guys know.
Yes.
And I go around the country and I tell people that most of the problems that we are currently having with American children and the raising of American children are due to the fact that we began listening to people like psychologists 45 years ago. And that if we had never listened to people like me, we would be in much better shape because these people constructed a progressive, child-rearing mythology and sold it to the American public. And the American public has no reason to believe that people with capital letters after their names don't know what they're talking about. But in fact, this was a very destructive child-rearing paradigm that was sold to the American public. And I am an evangelical Christian, and I speak in a lot of churches, and I tell people in churches, because that's the appropriate context for this comment, that this new parenting is completely anti-biblical. If you are familiar with God's plan for child rearing as set forth clearly in Scripture, then you know that the psychological paradigm runs completely, and I mean 100% counter to what God is expecting of parents and directing parents to do. And I'm a certified heretic when it comes to
I was just going to give you another certification. By the way you just described that whole thing, you're like fingernails on a chalkboard to the to these people. I can understand why they don't like you.
Well, I understand it too, and it doesn't bother me because I'm absolutely convinced that I'm speaking the truth.
No, I agree.
You guys are convinced you're speaking the truth, and you are. And I'm absolutely convinced I'm speaking the truth. And so, it doesn't bother me that they're upset with me. It's just the way it is. It's the price you pay as anyone in the Christian community who has a platform of any sort in the media should understand and accept. You become a target. And So I became a believer about 12, 13 years ago. Before that, I was, a seeker and not an atheist. I just didn't believe Jesus was the guy described in the Gospels. I thought all of that was mythology and, interesting story. And what was really interesting was how the story had developed. And I thought I was too smart for Jesus. And when I became a believer and came out publicly with that, I became more of a target and realized that immediately, that this is the price that you pay if you're an outspoken evangelical, a Bible-believing guy, and you have a public forum.
Well, we're talking to Dr. John Rosemond. You can find out more information about his work and his books at rosemond.com, ROSEMOND.com, rosemond.com. I'm just curious, the average, I think I've read, I don't have the stats here in front of me to back my statement up, but I've read where most people who become Christians do so, by the time they're 25 years old.
Yeah.
The vast majority. And yet you came to Christ later in your life, even deep into your professional career. Did you explore this on your own, or did somebody witness to you that convinced you of the correctness of the Bible? How did this happen?
It happened by reading The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. And of course, Lee's journey, and I've met Lee and thanked him for his role and his significance in my life. Lee's journey is very similar to mine. He was an atheist, married to a believer. I was not an atheist. I had accepted creation. I just had not accepted Christ. And Lee spelled it all out for me, and Lee did so in a way that appealed to me. Some people have a very emotional, transformative experience, and I had one that was more intellectual, and that's the kind of guy I am, is that people need to lay things out for me logically, and I'm a very empirically oriented person. And that's what Lee did in his book. And
but did somebody give you the book, or did you pick it up on your own?
Well, I was in a bookstore one day looking for a book that would feed my need to deny Christ, keep him at arm's length, and so I was looking for a book on the historical Jesus, or some book about a crucifixion conspiracy or something like that. And the Holy Spirit took my right hand and stretched it out, and I pulled Lee Strobel's The Case for Christ off the shelf, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. I'll go home and read this, and that is exactly why Lee wrote that book, as you guys know, and it did in my life what Lee had intended that book to do in the lives of its readers.
Wow, what a story! I had not heard that. We'd had you on before, but we were talking about parenting and your advice column, but not about your testimony. Talking to Dr. John Rosemond from North Carolina. If you want to read about, if you want to get his books called Rosemond, go to Rosemond. Or go to the bookstore if you want to, but Rosemond, ROSEMOND.com is the title of the book. I have one other question. What's your view, generally speaking, of, hey, this is a loaded question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, and you can, whatever you want to say. All this medication that's being subscribed for children today to adjust their behavior. I know I don't want to get into specifics because everybody's individual, but what do you think about that, generally speaking?
Well, I think that these disorders that we're diagnosing in children are examples of the sinful nature of the child and of human beings. And, attention deficit disorder and oppositional defiant disorder, in Jeremiah, God, through his prophet, laments that no matter what he does, the Israelites, his chosen people, will not pay attention to him or accept his discipline. So they've got attention deficit disorder and oppositional defiant disorder. And